Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining DataCon LA 2023. This is the Artificial Intelligence track. My name is Samyak, and I'm your host along with Kelly over there. As a reminder, please silence your phone during the session and refrain from any flash photography. A recording of this session will be uploaded to the DataCon LA YouTube channel within a month of this session. Today we have our guest, Mr. Joe Devon. Joe Devon is the head of accessibility and an AI futurist at Formula Mox. He's a technology entrepreneur and web accessibility advocate. He co-founded Global Accessibility Awareness Day and serves as a chair of it, focusing on promoting digital accessibility and inclusive design. Joe also explores artificial intelligence's potential to revolutionize digital accessibility, developing AI solutions to enhance online experiences for people with disabilities. Now, let me hand it off to Joe. Thank you.
Thank you, Samyak. Can everybody hear me all right?
Yes.
Great. So a lot of people are not aware that accessibility and AI are really quite intertwined. And hopefully by the end of the session, you will see it as well. There's a bit of echo here. Thank you. Is that better?
Yes.
Great. So this is going to be an interactive session, and I would love for you all to participate. So close your eyes and visualize a ball on a table. And now somebody is coming up to the table and pushing the ball. You can open your eyes now. Who feels like they have a really strong visualization of this? All right, why don't we start with you? What is the color? And can we get a mic over there? Can you, right here, right here. What is the size of the ball?
That's about this big.
All right, and what color is it?
Red.
And what is the texture of the table?
I think it's like this. It's like wood, smooth,
Wood. And what is the gender of the person who pushed the ball?
male. I think it was a man.
Okay. Did you have all of that in your head before I asked you, or you made it up after I asked you?
I made it up after. Yes.
Okay. Thank you. Did anybody here have a strong visualization beforehand? All right, we have a few hands. Why don't we pick the first gentleman over here?
Yes, my visualization is I was picturing a cue ball on top of a large dark wood table, and then it was pushed by a male hand.
Okay, and it was all there ahead of time.
Yes.
So that is great. You may have hyperphantasia, which is a very strong, vivid imagery. And you can check out Reddit. There's a subreddit called hyperphantasia. So now I'm going to ask you a bonus question. Describe the Google logo.
Okay, well, it's the word Google. I believe the G is not capitalized, although some people say it is. The coloring, I believe the G is blue, and I'm pretty sure that the O's are yellow first, then red. I believe the L is, the second G is blue. The L is, no wait. I'm losing it there. I believe the L is blue, and then I'm pretty sure the E at the end is red.
Okay, great. Well, I don't have hyperphantasia, so I wrote this and I don't remember at all. But hopefully you remembered the order that you said. Does anybody disagree with this gentleman? All right.
I think of the colors red, green, red, green, yellow, and blue in all kinds of different configurations.
All right.
And
Is it capital G or lowercase?
I'm not even thinking letter. I'm thinking actual iconography and logoing on the different products.
All right. Well, here's the answer. Capital G, blue, red, yellow, blue, green, red. Did anybody get that right? Because I don't remember. Did you get that right? You remember?
Well, yeah.
Well, you were looking at it.
Yeah.
Anyway, I have very low visual memory. My fiance has fantastic memory, and I tested it one day. I'm walking by this water plane or whatever you call it, and I told her, please describe it. And then she tells me, I just looked at it, was testing her, and she told me 3 colors that it was, and I was like, nah, I don't think there's blue there. Then we walk by and I see it again, and the blue was there. She literally sees this, and I see nothing. And here's a meme. This blows my mind, that if you're bored, you can simply close your eyes and rotate a cow in your mind. It's free and the cops can't stop you. To people with very little visual memory like me, this is just not easy to believe. Does anybody feel like they don't have any kind of visual memory? All right, we've got one here. And that is called aphantasia, which also has a good subreddit, where you don't have that ability to create something in your mind's eye. And this is another kind of blindness when we think about it. It's mind blindness. And so when you really think about it, what is a disability? We have some ideas of it, but there's so many different kinds of abilities, and we're all very unique and very different. If you want to test yourself for it, there's something called VVIQ at aphantasia.com. And there's also a subreddit. I didn't find the quiz to be that great, but try it out, see what you see. And then they've got this cool meme, Harry Potter in the movies and Harry Potter in the books. Does anybody here resonate with the Harry Potter in the books being nothing? And does anybody have this whole visual movie in their mind? Okay, that blows me away. So my name is Joe Devon, and I co-founded a day that has gone viral called Global Accessibility Awareness Day. We hit 200 million, over 200 million users on social media every year. It just came from an obscure blog post, and it just shows you how many people are affected by disabilities. And for work, I'm an AI futurist and head of accessibility, which allows me to think about how AI impacts disability. And it's really made me rethink the entire thing. Can anybody tell me, why would blindness be considered a disability?
Probably not the correct answer, but I think there's like, what, 2% that are colorblind, and there's a lot of visuals that are used with colors and stuff. So that person would not be able to distinguish between the colors.
All right, we have a couple others. So I don't think there's a right or wrong answer, or it's just opinions at the end of the day, but.
Well, I think to a level, you have to first start by kind of understanding what blindness kind of entails, which entails our visual perception, which for various animals on the planet, like moles or worms, they don't necessarily have eyes, and yet they're able to kind of operate, so they don't necessarily have a disability. But in the context of our society, where we are a species that relies on our sight very much, our interactions in society are based on sight, and a lot of the work that we conduct is on sight. So when people aren't able to see, they are at a disadvantage when trying to perform day-to-day tasks amongst individuals who can see, which is why we consider it a disability.
Okay, I go along with that answer, so I'll give you $1 here. I don't want to go out of frame, so we'll get somebody to, here we go, thank you. The average person can see, and that's why we are calling it a disability if you can't see. But is that really right? Now, I don't know how, I've never asked this question before in a talk, so I'm curious, how many people would consider color blindness a disability? All right, maybe a little more than half the room. And how many would not consider it a disability? All right, we got a handful. Okay. As far as accessibility is concerned, it has an impact for sure. And here's a picture of a restroom that has red and green for open, like occupied or not occupied. And the heading on that meme was, the hospital uses red-green toilet door lock indicators, and I've been waiting 5 minutes on 2 vacant toilets. And when it comes to accessibility, you know that you cannot use color to convey information, or people that are colorblind will not be able to see it. And what's interesting about color perception is that most human beings have 3 functional color cones. And therefore they observe color in RGB, which is why all of our screens are RGB, why all of the design tools use RGB, and it's all red, green, and blue wavelengths. But it's about the X and Y chromosome. So the X chromosome has 2 color cones, whereas the Y chromosome has 1 color cone. So for biological males who have an X and Y chromosome, in total, the max they can have is 3 color cones. And if they're all working properly, then you've got this RGB. And then for biological women who have XX, there are 4. So 8% of men are colorblind, and it's because there is a problem with one of these color cones. But what's interesting is there's something called tetrachromats. And in that case, you have some biological women that have 4 functional color cones, and they actually can see 100 million colors, which is incredible. The rest of us can only see 1 million. Does anybody feel like they see a lot of colors and they feel a little bit frustrated that the movies, the computer screens are very bland? Anybody here? All right, why don't we call on you? Describe your experience.
I think for me, I always find myself readjusting the settings at my home television because I'm thinking there's something wrong with the TV set. I should be seeing other colors that are happening there, especially if it's a movie that I know I'm familiar with and it's I've seen it in theaters, for example, in IMAX. So sometimes I'll go in and I'll watch TV and it's too dark. And I say, okay, it's a night scene, but it shouldn't be this dark. Or the darks look green, and I think it's something wrong with my TV.
Interesting. So have you heard of the term tetrachromat?
No, first time.
All right, check out the subreddit on that. Hold on to the mic because maybe we'll have some more thoughts here. Tell me if this resonates with you. There was somebody I read about, a tetrachromat, who asked for a particular green color in her room when she was a child, and then they painted it, and she was very upset because she's like, that's not the green I wanted. And her parents asked her to describe the green she wanted, and there was no word, there was no place to really show it because there's so much richness in the color. Does this resonate with you? Does this sound like something that you might experience?
I agree. Yeah, I think I see that a lot in like Home Depot, where you see the paint section. You see it in the paper and you think this is the one, this is perfect. But once you go home, you try that out, you're like, no, it looks awful here.
Yeah, so I find these kind of things like really fascinating. And then you've heard of the retinal display. Apple is so famous for creating that retinal display. Keep saying the R now, never happened to me before. They all are supposedly able to do 1 billion colors, but it's still based on RGB. Do you find that 8K, 4K, or retinal displays are still a little bit flat?
No, I think the higher the displays, the more you can distinguish between the different shades of pinks and reds and blues.
Okay, that's great feedback. I'm gonna give you $2. Thank you. You're the second tetrachromat that I've run into. This is my 3rd time giving this talk. This is your URL, tetrachromacy. I see it wrapped in here, but that's the subreddit. Now there's a question about your inner Umwelt. So do you see the same blue I see? And we have no way to know, but I guess if we all sort of agree on it, then that's cool, right? You remember the dress? So it turns out that they figured out why we see different things. And does anybody not know about the dress? Okay, so this went viral on the internet, on social media. They asked people, what color is the dress? So let me ask you all, what color do you see that dress as?
A lighter purple.
You see purple?
Yeah.
Interesting. That nobody usually does. Purple, and what's the other color?
Black.
Black, okay. I see gold and white. And on the internet, people were either seeing black and blue or gold and white. And the black and blue is the actual color, in fact. But everybody was blown away that we're seeing different things. And XKCD is a technical cartoon, and they explain why. So we're trying to fill in information. Our brains see a picture, and we're trying to fill in the information. And coming back here, it's the background here. To me, I see it very bright in the background. And there's probably some kind of optical illusion. Some people see it dark or something. Did you want to say something?
No, I was just trying to,
okay.
to
Got
smooth
it.
the background.
So over here, XKCD just showed you the exact same material. If you really try and narrow in, you'll see it's identical. But when you have that blue background, I see it as gold and white on the left. And then on the right, I see it as more like blue and sort of yellow. And this is the reason that we see it differently. How about an inner monologue? Does everybody here feel like they have an inner voice or an inner monologue? Is anybody missing one? Okay, I'd love to talk to you. You're the first person that I've heard that doesn't. Yeah. And I don't want to call you out in any way, but I'm just trying to understand, like, how do you think? Because for me, I have to put the words in my head before I speak. So, like, is there a visual? Is there an auditory, or you just come out with what you want to say without thinking about it? Like,
I don't know. It just kind of comes, I guess. There's no like, yeah, it just kind of comes out. There's no like voice. It just kind of think. Sometimes if I'm like thinking through like something complicated that's like multi-step, like I definitely like will mutter to myself and I'll hear it and then I'll understand what I'm saying, or I'll write it a lot and that helps. But yeah, there's no like inner like swirl or anything. It's just kind of, I guess it's quiet. I also don't have the inner like visual thing as well. So I guess I'm missing two things.
it's pretty common. I'm missing the visual, and to my fiance, it's very much like, are you kidding me? Like, she just couldn't believe we did some of these tests and she couldn't believe it. I definitely got to give you some cash too here. So I don't want to run out, so I'm sorry. It's just going to be $1. Okay. Yes.
I don't need any cash. We're from Arizona State University. We'll be talking later today at 1 o'clock. We have a teammate who's not here with us, who is identical. She doesn't verbalize thoughts, and we've had discussions.
Sorry about that. You speak it. Sorry,
Okay.
yes, for the video, so the people on the video.
Sorry, I'll start again. We're from Arizona State University from the Difference Engine. We'll be talking later. We have a All right, starting again. We have a colleague who's not here with us, who also doesn't have an inner voice. And we've had discussions with her, and what she tells us is that she visualizes. So all of her stuff is like, and she visualizes in a very specific way, like matte paintings from like Renaissance era paintings. And so that's how she thinks about, that's her inner voice. It's always a painting. So she doesn't think like, I'd like to eat an apple. It'll just be a picture of a half-eaten apple.
That's
how she thinks
fascinating.
about it.
Yeah, that's amazing. And the interesting thing is, when you're studying accessibility and people with disabilities, you think of all of these questions in a different way. So lacking an inner voice, if you go to ChatGPT, or if you try and Google it, you might struggle to find the name, but they're trying to call it anoralia. Hopefully I pronounced it right. And so this is an absence of auditory imagery in the mind's ear, and it can be considered a mind deafness. So another kind of sort of disability, right? But maybe not, because people think differently, and you'll see why soon. Think about it from the perspective of someone who's deaf. And this is really tricky. People don't spend a lot of time thinking about it, but when you're deaf, you have a communication, but it's not verbal, it's visual. Your entire experience, if you've never heard a sound, is visual. So what is an inner monologue for someone who's deaf? And what was really interesting is the other day I spoke with a CODA, which is a child of deaf adults, and he has heard since birth, but his mother tongue is American Sign Language, which is totally visual. So I asked him, do you have an inner monologue? And he said, yes, I do. I said, well, explain it to me. He said, it's actually in sign language. So it's a visual inner monologue. So that's where there's some commonality with what you were saying and what you were saying, that you can have a visual inner monologue. All of these things, to me, like, they blow me away, that every person's experience is different. And yes, there are certain disabilities, but everybody has a different ability. And we'll come to why AI is going to be sort of help to personalize and even hand the technologies that are going to come out from here. So similar to the dress, do you hear what I hear? There is Yanni versus Laurel. Does anybody not know the Yanni versus Laurel thing? It was a little less popular than the dress, but essentially there was a sound and some people heard Yanni and some heard Laurel. Are you able to play the sound?
Let's see.
You have to hover over and then click it.
Oh.
Oh.
I'll try. With the mic on. Oh, yeah.
One more time? All right. Who heard Yanni? Who heard Laurel? I heard Laurel. Can you try one more time? Oh, you also heard Laurel.
Yeah.
Laurel. See, we all have a different life here, right? And what's interesting is they found out that some of it has to do with how low the speaker is, so certain speakers could impact it, but we're all in this room hearing the exact same thing, and yet some of us hear Yanni, some hear Laurel. Now, when I was younger, everybody said that there were 5 human senses, but now they're saying 11, at least there's probably more. And the ones that I have bolded over here are the ones that you can experience in your mind's eye or whatever it be. So for me, sight, basically got nothing. Hearing, I do have that inner voice. Taste, nothing. Smell, nothing. Touch, nothing. Thermoception refers to the ability to detect heat or coldness. I can't do that in my mind's eye. Who can detect that in their mind's eye? The temperature. All right, we got a few, but a lot of people don't. And then nociception refers to pain. And then the others you can't really do in your mind's eye, which is equilibrioception, which is your balance. Proprioception is where your body is in space. Interoception is your ability to detect that you're hungry or you have to go to the bathroom or the like. And then temporal perception is time. So what about memory? You have people who might have dementia or Alzheimer's. So if you're unable to remember things, then you probably have a disability, right? But what about people that have hyperthymesia, which is total recall, essentially? There's only about 100 from the research I've been able to do. But for the rest of us, like, our memory is awful, isn't it? Don't we all have a disability here? And so as we're building technology, whether it's artificial intelligence or combining artificial intelligence with other technologies, if we can have a personal assistant that can help us remember everything, then this is part of accessibility, it's part of artificial intelligence, but we can't just say it's about disability. This is going to be an interesting one. Does anybody here have a word or a number that evokes a specific color? All right.
Yeah, and this is one of the reasons I'm here. My other life is a musician, and I designed a data visualization for music harmony and the mechanics of music for this reason. It's because I see the colors and they correspond to different frequency positions.
All right, so what is the actual color that this slide is? And then what colors do you see in addition?
Oh, in the slide, I mean,
Yeah.
it's kind of like a pastel purple, very faint. But there's also bands of blue and orange and yellow, I mean, just from the reflection. And then there's a screen of like pointillist dots all over it as well, super fine.
That, like, wow. So, but do you know what the actual color on this screen is? What's the color of the letters?
Oh, you mean like the hex code? Or
No, in
the,
other words, what is the words, the sentence is in what color, the actual color? Can you tell the difference? Or is it all like multicolored for you?
no, that's a consistent tone.
Okay, because for most of the people in the room, this is white on black.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
You don't have that.
I mean, I can tell, I mean, I know that it's a high contrast slide, but it's not white and it's not black. It's definitely very tonal.
Yeah, so again, very individual. Is anybody here freaking out by this description? Okay, yeah, I am, and I know about this, and I'm freaked out about it. But I think it's wonderful. I think these differences are amazing. So this is called synesthesia. So what has anybody heard of synesthesia? Okay, a lot of people here have, but a lot haven't. So on the left, you've got for most people, black numbers on a white background, and it's 5s and 2s. For me, they sort of meld into each other. I can differentiate the 2s and the 5s, but they're pretty much all mushed together. And then on the right, you have the 5s in green and the 2s in red. Unless you're colorblind, most color blindness, red and green are sort of gray and gray. I'm curious what you see over here on the left and the right. Sorry. Yeah.
Oh, I definitely can distinguish the red and the green and the solid, the blacks.
Okay, so for you, the one on the left is all black and on the right, it's red and green.
Yeah.
Okay, so what's interesting is that people with synesthesia tend to have really good memories because these things kind of stick out at them. And I did see a meme on Reddit where somebody said, it's very easy for me to remember my social security number, and you just put little colors down, and every letter there's like 5 major types of synesthesia, but there's probably a lot more like little details. And this is cross-sensory perception, because when you're looking on the left, you only have black, so you don't have your color cones being hit, and yet you perceive it as if your color cones were hit because you're crossing senses. Now, this probably sounds pretty strange, tasting vision. Anybody have a clue where I'm going with this? Sir?
Yeah.
Wait for the mic.
Yes. So I can look at something, look at like a burger, or I can look at some chicken, and I can actually taste it based on what it looks like. I'm imagining that's what you're referring to.
It isn't, but that's a form of synesthesia. It's fascinating.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, so you probably have some form of synesthesia. I think we lost the slides here, so I'll share it in a second so we get it back. While he's working on that, does anybody have any thoughts that came out of what we've talked about so far?
No, the synesthesia, isn't that like preconditioned memory?
Can you repeat it, the question in the mic?
Yeah, the synesthesia, isn't that the preconditioned memory from previous experiences? And
Not really, but what's interesting is that you have people that they will tell you that the A is a particular color, the B is a particular color, the C is a particular color. And a neuroscientist, David Eagleman, actually did research to try and figure out why do people have the same color for the alphabet? And he did all of this research and then finally figured out, because he noticed that there's the exact same alphabet color for about 15% of the population, I think from the 60s or 70s, for about 20 years. And then they found out that Lego, I think it was, came out with a little alphabet toy that had the colors in a particular order. And then all these people that were synesthetes, they had the exact same color palette. And the reason for it is because the first time you saw it, you formed a new memory and a new association, and it was burned into your brain for life, which I think is pretty interesting. So
We lost the clicker, but I think besides that, everything fine.
okay, so go to the next slide. Wait, go back one more. And one more. Okay, so the next slide, this is called the brain port. And what this is you've got a camera on the glasses that is filming, and then it turns into an electrical signal on a little lollipop that goes on the tongue. And if you're blind, you can see through your tongue, which was pretty crazy. And I wanted to try it out because I saw them at a conference, but they said you're not blind and you need FDA approval, so I couldn't try it, unfortunately. But the way it works is something called sensory substitution. And it sounds kind of crazy if you don't think about it. But when you're seeing, you have vision coming into your eyes, but there's not like another little person in your brain that has a projector and is looking at what's going on. Your brain is completely dark. And what you're actually seeing are electrical signals. So what it's doing here is it's taking these electrical signals, putting it on the tongue because there's lots of nerves in the tongue, and then sending that electrical signal to the brain. And that's why people can see using sensory substitution. Next slide. Similarly, touching sound, and this is again David Eagleman, who's fantastic. If you find this topic interesting, you can see, you should check out his podcast because he has lots on this topic. Next slide. And what he did was he took an iPhone, he took the sound from an iPhone and turned it into haptic touches on a haptic vest and gave it to a deaf person for an hour a day. And by the third or fourth day, he could already detect words. So behind his back, David Eagleman would say a word and he would write it on the whiteboard, and he heard it through haptic touches on his back. And that's sensory substitution. So you could see the similarity between synesthesia, which is cross-sensory perception, and this, which is sensory substitution. Is this all making sense? Anybody have questions on this so far?
Yeah, this question.
Okay, what does this have to do with artificial intelligence? Okay, oh, next slide. So what is artificial intelligence really? It's about understanding sensory input, generating output and cognitive processing. And when you think about it, disability is actually a disruption in the sensory input as well as output. Next slide. And they're very synergistic because all of these things that I'm talking about that are making you rethink a little bit what our abilities and disabilities are, if you do testing with people with disabilities, you are going to build a much better technology. Next slide. And the AI firms are aware of it. When you look at OpenAI, they partnered with Be My Eyes, which is an app that pairs volunteers who are sighted with folks who are blind and help them to see. And when they launched GPT-4, Be My Eyes was a launch partner for their multimodal output. And they know that this testing is very valuable. Next slide. So what are you really trying to do in understanding sensory input? Automated speech recognition. So you take something like YouTube, which has automated captions, or craptions as the folks who are deaf like to call it. This all came out of AI models. And once we reach the point where they are as good as human beings at detecting speech, you're going to see lots of amazing applications that are great for people with disabilities, but it'll be great for everyone. And Google noticed that they had a problem with the quality of their models and understanding some people's input, because there are about 250 million people that have certain non-traditional speech. And so they said they wanted to improve their models, so they created this Project Relate that helped train these models with people that had non-traditional speech, and that has improved their ability to understand speech. And so that's just one example of how studying disability and accessibility are tied in with artificial intelligence. Next slide. And this is Segment Anything, which is a Meta project, and they take images as well as video. They try to segment out the objects and understand the objects. Now, if you're blind, we would ask that you put alt text into an image to describe an image, or in video to do audio description. So in the silences to describe what's going on in the scene. But what I see as new assistive technologies are going to be where you can query an image. So wouldn't it be interesting if if you're looking at an image as a blind person, you're saying, what is the painting in the background? Who made the painting? What about the furniture in the room? Are the two tied together? And there are things that the AI is going to be able to provide that you do not necessarily know as the human putting in that alt text, and you can query the scene. And where I really see this taking things to another level is, instead of audio description, if you imagine something like Game of Thrones, which has like 250 people in it. Like I said, my memory isn't that great. I don't remember a character at the end of a movie, and I'm always amazed when people do. But now somebody comes in and I want to know who is this character. So in the future, I believe that if you're blind, you'll be able to query the scene and ask a character, who are you? What family are you from? What geography? What was your first episode? And what does the scene look like from different people's perspectives? But it's going to be something that's really useful for everybody, not just people with disabilities. Next slide. And then you have cognitive translations. A lot of you might be aware, you heard of ELI 5, Explain Like I'm 5. Those that don't follow Reddit won't really know this, but Reddit has this little section called Explain Like I'm 5. And if you go to ChatGPT, you can take a complicated text and ask it to change the grade level who you're describing it to. So if you have a cognitive disability, it will be great to use this, but you could also tailor school materials to different grade levels. So you can see where that can be really useful. And again, if you test with people with disabilities, you can't fake it, which is the great part of really focusing on accessibility and AI. And then I think robotics, there needs to be a little bit more work. This is a picture of Groot. A friend of mine actually built this for Disney. They recreated the gait of Groot, and it was really, really hard to put this together. But the future of AI will use machine learning, and I know that Google and some others are working on this, where it's going to really help the robots to follow, to be able to move around and things like that. Once this happens, it's going to be really helpful for people with disabilities and pretty much everybody. Next slide. So what is the future going to really look like is artificial intelligence will be personalizing the experience to every person. Next slide. And reality will be generated in real time in the exact format you need. So if you are blind, you live a very verbal life, and it's going to translate, because the transformers are really good at taking one language or one type of input and turning it to another. So it's going to take everything that is visual, turn it to verbal. If you are deaf, then sensory input will become visual because you live a visual life. And then last but not least, we're going to see that haptics using sensory substitution will be used for people who are deafblind because they're going to be able to understand it through the haptics. Next slide. So the brick phone was awesome in its day, but it was really huge. Those that are younger probably haven't seen this unless you've seen this movie. But it was really cool when it came out, but very bulky. And in my opinion, next slide, the smartphone, as great as it is still too big, and it's going to have to go away. And using some of the technologies that are being built with people with disabilities is going to help make that happen. Spatial computing, you saw Apple came out with something recently, and if you've ever used any VR headset, they're amazing, but they're way too bulky. So this is going to have to change. It's just a matter of time. And next slide. So what will the new technology stack look like? Next slide, let me just do a time check. Brain-computer interfaces. A friend of mine is working on cognition. His mom had gotten sick and she had shut-in syndrome, so she had no way to communicate. So after she got better, he did this startup that's trying to understand through the brain, allow the brain to communicate with devices and control devices. And won't it be cool the day that all of us can have a brain-computer interface, so we don't have to type, we don't have to play with our phones, we can tell the machine what to do just with our thoughts. Using sensory substitution, I believe that's going to be an output device where you'll be able to take in information. And then you might have seen this TED Talk, next slide. Humane.ai, some former Apple engineers are working on something that will sort of is a wearable that will sort of live here, and it will display things, project things, and communicate in different ways. Next slide. And the purpose of all of this is just to share that the companies that are going to succeed in this space are going to have accessibility as part of their secret sauce. They're going to test with people with disabilities because this is going to make the difference. And I think we should stop thinking about accessibility as being mostly about people with disabilities. All of us, as we've seen today, have very different abilities, and AI plus other technologies together are going to augment every single ability we have and hopefully maximize it. And that will be accessibility for everyone. Thank you.
Thank you so much for the presentation. So we can have 10 minutes for the Q&A.
Great.
Please raise your hand if you have any questions.
First of all, I agree on your phone. These things are too darn heavy, and I think it's in the buggy stage. If you look at the expanse, you can see holograms and. But my question goes back to you talk about the grade level, and I think that's super important because I deal with the PowerPoints and presentations, and we use something called, and we had to do this on our own, Flesch Kincaid. You're probably familiar with that, which does the Word has that on it where you can tweak the language to a certain grade level because most people have, I think it's at like an 8th or 9th grade reading level. And it's kind of an art, but you can have AI do this for you. So I think it'll advance the ability to communicate information on specific grade levels. That's all.
Absolutely. Was that a question or?
No, it's not
Yeah.
like anything.
Yeah.
His application.
No, that's what I thought. I just wanted to make sure. Sounds like I lost the sound. Okay.
Here is one question.
Yes.
Thanks. Just real quick, and I only caught the last bit of this. This is fantastic. A lot of my work is international, so hearing all these wonderful innovations, it seems like the people who could benefit from the most will likely have the least access to this stuff because of socioeconomic political factors. Do you see a future where we can kind of capitalize on people's humanity, get this into the hands of the people who need it most?
I love that question because I've been thinking about that quite a bit, and I'm trying to figure out, I don't know much about grants and things like that, but I'm trying to figure out how to get grants or get some funding from somebody in order to partner with different disability organizations in order to generate data. So what I'd love to do is for my company to create like apps that can be disseminated to particular audiences through a disability organization, gather the data, open source it, and then allow others to build applications on it. We can build applications on it for our clients, but make this available widely. And we're in 7 of the top 10 big tech companies. And this is something that I've heard over and over again from the big tech companies is, let's say you take ASL, the data is there. But if you're trying to look at, there's as many sign languages as there are languages, pretty much. And there is not a lot of data outside of the really big ones. And so we definitely need that. And a lot of people are really aware of it. So personally, I'd love to work on that. We'll see if we'll find the funding.
Okay.
Can I just like?
No, we need a little recording.
Hi, my name is Bosky. Very recently, my husband, he suffered brain stroke. He's still trying to sync between what thoughts his brain has and what is that he wants to say. So I was very curious on the slide where you said eventually we would be at a point where whatever our brain is thinking, we would be able to communicate. Are there any research which are already being done specifically with the brain stroke patients?
There's definitely a lot of research in that space. And if you just Google BCI, brain-computer interfaces, you will see lots on that. Look up Cognition, COGNIXION. They have a device. You can reach out to me as well, and I'll connect you up with them. And there's also a company called Emotive that has these little brain hardware that you can write APIs against, and people are building projects against that. There's actually a bunch of different companies working on that.
Thank you.
here, some people have questions.
Thank you. I think that what you talked about here is really great. Something that I would like to maybe possibly just address is that one of the concerns about AI, while you've described a very good picture of how it can be very inclusive, because how AI can be designed as an approximation function, it can also become very exclusive in regards of engaging with people who are on outliers, right? Because if they don't necessarily fit within the distribution, they can be considered outliers, and then maybe there's not a place for them in society. So what are some things that people can do to kind of make sure that, you know, we kind of flatten out that curve there, that we don't necessarily have outliers being left behind as we go through these innovations?
Yeah, so it's interesting because this is more of a general audience. So I pulled out a few slides, but I'm planning to give this talk at accessibility meetups all across the country, maybe the world. And to that audience who is very often talking about the dangers, the ethics of AI, and lots of concerns about it. And what I say is, yeah, I'm painting a really good picture, because if we don't get involved and we don't see the potential and we let other people run with it, we're going to be left behind, because the disability community is always the last. They're left behind. And it is like right in line with what's being built. We can be so helpful to the new technology that we've got to get involved. So I have another slide usually where I say, if we don't come in and build this and we don't dive in 100%, then we're going to be left behind. So I'm trying to motivate people to actually go in and say, okay, we're gonna really push for this. But at 1 o'clock, this is a great lead-in. I'm moderating a panel here with Chris and Dr. Roy in the back, and Jean, who was the last speaker. And we're going to be talking about ethics and AI. So you might want to attend that one, and you'll probably hear a different perspective, but we'll see.
Hi, thank you so much for the talk. That was very fascinating. I'm a current high school teacher, and I was wondering, or I was thinking of a lot of students with learning disability, and it always blows my mind how students process and learn differently. And I was just wondering if you know any education tech company or any of the application of these in the education sector.
Good question. I know that our company, before I joined, was doing some educational work, and I've personally proposed using some of this in terms of the curriculum, being able to translate it. And there's a whole world. I'm not in the education space personally, so I don't know the companies doing this, but I'm sure that there are. I'm sure that folks are talking about it. So sorry, I can't help you better.
Anyone have?
Yeah, I was just wondering, you had this slide that said personalize your experience. Is that scary to you also at the same time as kind of useful when you look at disabilities?
Absolutely. To me, what's going on right now is fascinating and scary at the same time. I'm not coming in and trying to say, oh, there's not going to be a negative to this. There absolutely will. We've got to be really concerned about some aspects of this, particularly the autonomous agents. You're going to have nefarious actors putting in a lot of work on personalizing, spam, scams, these kind of things. Yes, it's very terrifying. But we've got to go in with a positive and build good things to counteract this. And this is probably another whole talk. Like, everybody's like, what should I do around AI? What AI company should I build? The whole startup scene is around it. And I'm thinking an anti-AI company that's going to deal with all these personalized scams. That is a really big use case. And I don't think enough people are thinking about it.
Thank you so much. We still have 1 minute for the last question. Okay.
It's not exactly a question, but I just went to like a product development meeting thing, and someone was talking about like accessibility and like developing applications and just technology around people with disabilities, and they were talking about the design, and I think it was some sort of thing where they worked at a company that had some sort of application for picking up students in different like rural regions and stuff like that. And some of it had to do with like the bus routes and figuring out like how to optimize things. And, you know, one portion of it was like students with disabilities, like physical disabilities, for example, and like what was the best bus trip for them or what was the best accommodation for them. And I remember hearing some other product development person say like, well, I don't understand, like, why do we need to think about like the fringe cases? Like they're just fringes, like that's a waste of money. And there was a lot of people that like agreed. So it's kind of an interesting area to be in, like data ethics and stuff like that, because yeah, like some people in technology don't seem to think that that's an issue, which I don't know, it's just very concerning.
Yeah, that's actually part of the reason for this whole conversation, is so that we rethink what is ability and disability, and really realize how huge this is. And part of this is really the business of it. I just heard a really good story. It was in, let's see if I can remember it right, The Twilight Zone. There was an episode where somebody came in and offered somebody, if you push this button, you are going to get $1,000. I see you smiling, so you probably heard of this one. You're going to get $1,000, but somebody very far away is going to die. And the person was sitting there thinking, what am I going to do? What am I going to do? I really need the money. And the entire night was sweating. And then at a certain point, it was just like, all right, I'm going to go and I'm going to push the button. Push the button. Next day, somebody comes in, knocks on the door, gives him $1,000. And he's like, well, what now? He's like, well, okay, somebody died on the other side of the world, but no worries, you have your 1,000. Now I'm going to take this box and I'm going to give it to somebody else very far away from you. And if they take the $1,000, you know, you're the next person that dies. So essentially, the average person will spend 11% of their lives with a disability. So you're sitting here and you're developing a product and you have a fringe case, which is a huge part of the population, and one day it's going to be you. So that's how I answer that question. Sorry if that's a little nasty, but.
So can I take another question?
Yeah, sure.
Hi, I actually have kind of a follow-up comment to this last gentleman's thing, so I hope it's okay and that I'm not bogarting the session. I think that the thing that sort of pushback about like what's the cost and why is it worth it, that actually betrays an issue with the endemic way that we think that is sort of a, I mean, you could argue if you wanted a disability in the overarching thinking of our society, which is that if we can't count it, it doesn't count. And if we don't stop treating our values questions as accounting questions, we are going to continue to have really, really vile outcomes that are totally preventable. So the framing of these pushbacks from these people is that they are thinking in math, and life is exceptionally more rich and dimensional than that. And I would encourage anybody who wants to perpetuate this argument in the face of such sort of quiet bigotry to use it, because pushback like that is bullshit. So, yeah.
Yeah, I agree with you. But I've just been in so many rooms where you have like CFO types and it's all accounting, and they literally don't hear you unless you frame it in a way that they can sort of, what's the word I'm looking for, associate with. It's just sort of like a wavelength thing. They just don't even hear your words unless it's framed through accounting, you know.
You're wrong.
I agree with you.
I'm in UX design, and this is how we frame it, is accessibility is the ultimate UX. Because if you're designing for, you know, if you're designing for all those use cases, it lifts all boats basically. You know, you're getting everybody. So yeah, that's the financial argument. That's my counter to the financial.
Yeah, I mean, another one I do when we're talking about UX is, you know, if you're sitting there and you're designing a button for a Slack or some kind of tool that has an online, offline indicator, and you're making it red and green, then anybody who's colorblind, it's going to be like gray and gray, right? And it costs you a lot more if you have to fix it later. And if you do it in advance and you make sure that you don't just use color to convey information, it costs you nothing. And this example I use is that I used to be a programmer working on AmericanIdol.com, and we had to, you know, we were trying to get rid of IE6 for years. And then finally we were able to get rid of IE6. We got everybody's approval. It went live, and the very big brand that you've heard of, the CEO of that brand went to the website and he was using IE6. And it didn't matter that everybody else was done with IE6, the CEO of this big brand was using it, and you don't know if that person is colorblind, had a stroke, or God knows what else. So when you're ignoring them, you never know who you're excluding.
Okay, so thank you so much for June, the wonderful presentation and also the audience. Question, the interaction.